Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eamonn Wall of UMSL Global, and you are most welcome here to UMSL Global and to the University of Missouri, St. Louis. We have some people gathered here in the room, and we have many more on the live stream. So not only will we have this event today, but we can, when it goes up on YouTube, we can watch it again and again and look at ourselves in the audience. So just a few words of thanks before we get started to Bob L here, who helps with all of these Irish events over the years and has been so helpful to us and setting up today's event. And Patricia Zahn is here. She's the Director of Community Engagement for the university. So it is wonderful that she is joining us today. And Lauren Overmark has just come in, Professor Lauren Overmark, who's in charge of the writing program here in the English part of the campus. So she is most welcome as well. And so you are all part of our community of students and of faculty and of a larger community that are out there, and also staff colleagues here in UMSL Global. So everybody is welcome. This is our final event of the spring semester and of the academic year of events on campus. So we will have the study abroad program beginning in the middle of June in Galway in Ireland. If you want to go, it's probably too late now, you know, because the deadline has passed. But just keep it in your plans for next year. On May 2nd, we will have our Irish American salon at the Webster Groves Public Library, an evening of music and poetry and prose. And we'll send out flyers for that as well. And you will be welcome to join us and to attend that. This afternoon, we have a celebration of the Irish poetry and Irish fiction. As you know, Ireland is known for a number of things. Troublemaking, brewing of whiskey, distilling of strong liquors, Guinness, all of these things. But also, of course, Ireland is renowned in the world for its writers, in poetry and in fiction, on the stage, and in all of the genres. And in some ways, Ireland, I think, as a literary nation, is at a hot moment, and so we are thrilled just to end the academic year with two fine writers from Ireland, and so the program will run for about 45 or 50 minutes. Each of the readers will read for about 25 minutes. And then we will have time afterwards for questions and answers. And our first guest today, and again, a great welcome to both Rosemary and Luke, is Rosemary Jenkinson. And Rosemary Jenkinson is a Belfast short story writer, playwright, novelist, and poet. So she's one of those writers who's good at everything. Her debut novel, The Memorizers, was published by Ireland House in 2025, and her debut poetry collection, Sandy Row Riots, last year. She has also written and published 7 short story collections. Love in the Time of Chaos was Edge Hill Prize shortlisted, and her latest is Lag Inside Lights. The Irish Times has praised her for her elegant wit, horrific characterization, and an absolute sense of her own particular Belfast, among other things. And I will mention today too, in thanks, that the Arts Council of Northern Ireland and the British Council have facilitated her reading tour of the US. So a big St. Louis welcome, please, for Rosemary Jenkinson.
Yeah, thanks, Eamon, so much. So this is part of my US tour, as Eamon just said, and it was really St. Louis was the kind of cornerstone of the whole tour because he was the first to arrange this through Alan Hayes, my publisher. So I call this tour, I Have Nothing to Declare But My Guinness. I know some people probably I know in America, not everybody knows that is an Oscar Wilde quote. When he came to customs, he said, I have nothing to declare but my genius. So I just explained that in case anybody, but as English students, you should probably know that. Obviously, Oscar Wilde, as Eamonn was saying last night, did a tour of St. Louis, or one of his stops. And obviously, he was prancing around with lilies and talking about aesthetics. So I'm not going to be doing that, but I'm going to start off with showing you my novel, The Memorizers, which was published this January. And this is, well, it's a novel really, as you can imagine from the title, about memory. So I think I've always said that life is too short for long literature. So I've always been a short story fan all the way. So I do believe I'm quite a hypocrite in finally publishing a novel. And I just read a quote by, I don't know if you know, the Turkish writer Orhan Pamuk. And he said that literature is not only about chronicling repression, but discovering that under repression, there is humanity. And I think that really describes what I was trying to do with The Memorizers. I think context would be really helpful for you. I mean, here I am in the USA. You have a huge ocean between you and Europe, so you don't really have to worry about being invaded. But right now in Europe, we have those fears of, even though Belfast is, we have like the Irish Sea protecting us, you could say. But Europe, yes, I think I've been to Ukraine 5 times since the war started. So that's really the starting point for my novel, The Memorizers. When I went to Ukraine, I thought, what if there was a war in Belfast? What would that look like? What if it swathed across Europe? I imagine that Russia in 2025 launches a nuclear war. And subsequently, they join forces with China and obviously invade the whole of Europe. So this was really what I imagined. And I don't think that was too much of an imagination leap to make. You know, we were very worried about the Russian-Ukraine war. And so I imagine that Ireland, here we are, 32 years in the future. It's called Western Front West. The UK is Eastern Front West. And so here I'm going to start. I'm going to read from the very start of the first chapter. And the protagonist is Jo Elliott, and she's a war journalist who is in hospital after being injured in a drone attack. Around noon, Dr. Morgan strode in with a tablet of questions. What was your birth giver's maiden name? He asked to check my memory. Birth giver. At that, I chuckled. I knew my mum's name was Kate, but her surname had slipped my mind years ago because she and Dad died in a fire when I was 4, and all the documents had been burnt to cinders. I don't know her name. Morgan? He pursed his lips at my levity. He seemed in a rush to free up a bed. Your age? He asked. 29. When did the enemy invade Western Front West? I paused while the numbers disentangled themselves. Post-nuclear, 35? What is Kerensky Samara's 5-point plan for peace? I recognized the Grand Commander's name, but couldn't for the life of me remember their peace plan. It made my head pound to think. I don't have a baldy. Don't have a clue, he corrected me sharply. I'll put that down to temporary impairment. Local dialect had been forbidden for the past 10 years. All that was permissible were some mainstream anodyne words of American and British slang from the Diverserlang dictionary, but it was strange how words kept leaking through the crack in my skull. On the streets, dialect was still spoken, though most people whispered it in case anyone in authority designated it word crime. Social cohesion was the only means of winning the war, said the Grand Commander. Unity through language, they insisted. The theory was that if language was a unifying force, then the Sino-Russians, in the event of victory, wouldn't be able to impose either of their languages. As soon as Dr. Morgan left, Kyle whispered, "Are you sure you don't remember the peace plan? It's like the catechism. Every woman, child, and cat knows it." Catechism, cat. It was an archaic word, but I'd heard it somewhere. What is a catechism? It's religious words we used to recite, said Kyle, keeping his voice low, in church. Kyle must have been in his 70s, I guessed. He had a wizened, monkeyish face with eyes that still had a spark in them. Whether from intelligence, mischief, or cunning, I couldn't tell. His head was bandaged and the emptiness under his sheet showed that his lower legs had been amputated. Sometimes when he moved, the sheet weirdly swelled like it was haunted. One withdrawal of Sino-Russian troops, said Kyle, and the rest of the peace plan flooded onto the screen of my mind. I called out to Annie and asked if I could repeat the test. Dr. Morgan strode back 10 minutes later, looking quizzical. He murmured skeptically. He held my skull in his hands. It aches, I said. It would be surprising if it didn't. He looked straight at me, and there was something shifting in the blue of his eyes, some sort of honesty, at least a projection of honesty, in his attempt to instill trust in me, along with a glint of amusement at how I was judging him. Do you remember why you were on the front line? No. He nodded, almost pleased at my answer. One thing I knew for certain was that I'd visited my boss on the morning of my injury, but I couldn't recall a word of our conversation. I can discharge you with painkillers, Dr. Morgan said, as long as you've no serious neurological symptoms to concern us. To be honest, the back of my brain sometimes felt as if a host of tiny butterflies had been set loose, though I couldn't tell him about it in case he labelled it imaginary or an excuse not to go back to work. I was terrified of ending up in the PTSD lab. I'd heard of people being marooned there for months or given strong medication in order to be shipped back to the war. The most important rule I'd learned in life was never to have volunteer information. Subterfuge was survival. Reticence was a lifesaver. Those mottos sounded like something the Grand Commander might formulate, but never had. Yeah, so that was the start. And really the key to this novel is all about language and language control, because it's something I feel very passionate about. For instance, the lack of free speech through non-criminal hate crimes. I don't know if you know, but in the UK, if you send any sort of tweet that is considered incendiary, the police can be knocking on your door and arresting you in the middle of the night. So this, to me, it was like Orwell's 1984, and I imagined word crime rather than Orwell's thought crime. Another thing that also has really influenced this book, well, firstly, it was written during the time of Biden, not Trump, so there may be some changes since here, but it's on the same kind of theme of lack of free speech. A cancellation culture has been a thing very close to my heart. Having experienced myself, I had a novel dropped after I wrote a contentious article about Troubles writers. And so therefore that really has concerned me that writers like myself aren't allowed to express our free opinion. And I suppose that in language, there are other things that I've been interested in. And in my novel, The Grand Commander of Western Front West uses they, them pronouns because they want to be all things to all people. And I suppose I'm just looking at how language can be subverted and used in different ways in the future that we can't imagine right now. And I suppose when we think of the future, it's all AI, digital things in the future, but I wanted to think of a world in which books and personal computers are banned and there is no social media, which I actually think is a utopia. But anyway, I'm going to read something else from this book. And I want to go actually to a dememorization process. Has anybody here read Anthony Burgess's Clockwork Orange? Yeah, a few. It's a totally brilliant way in which those kind of scientific ideas are viewed as dystopian. And obviously Brave New World is in this mold as well. I mean, yeah, Margaret Atwood, A Handmaid's Tale is definitely also another influence in this because it's just such a classic, and particularly the ending that gives the whole book a context. So anyway, here we go for the dememorization process. Don't try to hide anything. Your impulse will be like a dog burying a bone. The deeper you hide it, the more invasive your treatment will be. You might lose everything, but I'm doing all I can to save your short-term recall function. I can see your connectome cells lighting up on screen as you access every memory. I tried harder. It's vague. He had green eyes and black hair. You're sure his eyes were green? Said Dr. Morgan. A sudden doubt hit me. I don't know. Were they more of a greenish hazel? Good woman. You're showing progress. Confusion is progress. Confusion followed by clarity. I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm just making you quiescent. Your path will go from wrong thinking to confusion to enlightenment. Out of nowhere, I felt a wave of gratitude to Dr. Morgan. He was my teacher, my guide, and I immediately realized I'd do anything to get out of there. I'd leave all my memories on this table if I had to. What did it matter anymore, this dark-haired man I hadn't seen in years? All he ever did was give me pangs of regret. What good had that ever done me? I'd be mad not to grab this chance at a new life with both hands. It finally registered with me that this was my alternative reality. I'd actually found it. The Grand Commander says, the past must not be in the present. It must stay in the past. Repeat it, he said. The past must not be in the present. It must stay in the past. The past must not be in the present. It must stay in the past. I started slurring the words, but Dr. Morgan barked at me to concentrate. I tried to control myself. This was not a place of torture, but of learning. If I attended to my studies, I'd reach a higher level of consciousness, one that would mean I was free physically and mentally. Well done, said Dr. Morgan, satisfied. Now you know I'm not torturing you. The torture was all in your own head. You were an expert in self-torture. Once you decided on a collision course with the state, there was no way out. You always wanted to be hurt by the government, and that's why you went to find books in the old library. What were those books about? Peace in this country. There never was real peace. Where did you put the book? The facts were slow to come to me. I didn't put it anywhere. Scott took it. Don't prevaricate. Where did the book go? I hesitated, and the sharp shock of pain was dialed up to 11. I cried out for mercy. Please, please. You disappoint me, he said, just when we were making progress. So yeah, so that is the dememorization process. Now I know that Luke is going to do the poetry after this, but also I had my very first poetry book called Sandy Row Riots, published this year. And I think, yeah, I'd always said I would never be a poet, just like I said I'd never be a novelist, but sometimes you just have to diversify. I thought after 7 short story collections, I could probably branch out. So I'm going to read a very, very short poem from it. Proverbs for all writers. A rejection a day keeps the ego away. A word in time saves 9. Axioms speak louder than words. So that is a brief one. Okay, so my latest short story collection, Lagaside Lights, will be coming to America soon through Syracuse University Press. And I'm going to read something from my previous short story collection called Love in the Time of Chaos. Now, my 2 favorite subjects are sex and death. Not necessarily in that order, but I like sex best because I've obviously done it, whereas I haven't done death yet. So this is Joe Orton, the playwright, if you know him, he was an English playwright, and he always said that sex will get people screaming in the aisles. So I always believe it's good for that. As I just told you, I've always loved the short story. To me, great art is not about the length of form, but about the length of thought behind the form. It was an academic called Caroline McGuinness called me Belfast's Pleasure Laureate, and I love that title, so I have to live up to that a bit. And my favorite writers are Colette, Anais Nin, and Bukowski. So when I do write about sex, I always do it about, well, not always, but these days I like to do it about women over 50, because women over 50 are considered to be invisible in this society in a sexual sense. So I view this as a form of feminist activism, which gives my sex a bit more gravitas. Ass. So it's about sex. I can't help it. I was also going to say, going back to Oscar Wilde, that Tinder is a little bit like Oscar Wilde used to always say, being with rent boys is like feasting with panthers. So I think Tinder is like feasting with panthers because you don't know what you're going to get. So, and I thought if this short story is going to be made into a movie, I would like Tilda Swinton playing me, and I would really like Paul Mescal playing the man because he's Irish and hot. So, okay, here we go. This is from Love in the Time of Chaos. Flicking through the profiles, I began to consider my potential suitors. I avoided the men who posed in their sunglasses, the men who posed with children, and definitely the men who posed with their pet dog. One thing I was starting to realize on Tinder was that if the only photo they give you is a headshot, it means they're fat. Some men talked of looking for something serious, and I instantly swiped left. What I've looked for in life is an endless honeymoon. I'm an epicure, a hedonist, a bacchanalianist. People think I'm into no-feeling sex, but I'm so romantic. I find romance in the unromantic, meaning in the meaningless, feeling in the feelingless. Years ago, there was this steamy sex film with Mickey Rourke and Kim Basinger called 9.5 Weeks. But to me, 9 weeks counts as a long-term relationship. The truth is, I don't enjoy the quotidian realness of a relationship. The arguments, the submission, the compromise. I'd far rather have 1 day of ideal over a year of real. Life is much too short for repetition. At last, I found the perfect profile. A selfie displaying his serious brown eyes and full lips, with an unprepossessing grey wall behind. The naturalness of it. It was so real, I knew he'd be ideal. And I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but life is full of contradictions and ambivalence. It was his words that made the greatest impression. Looking for no string sex, any age, size, shape, race, religion. I don't have a type, just know what I like when I see it. Not looking for a relationship, but doesn't have to be a one-time thing. The delicious honesty of it. He didn't give his name, but his initials AM. So I guessed he was married, not that it mattered, as that was up to his own conscience. The best thing was he was 12 years younger. What could I do but press like? And he liked back, making us an instant match. Then we messaged back and forth. Obviously, I had to establish that he wasn't an axe murderer or stalker without actually asking if he was such. I'd read about a woman murdered by her Tinder date and found in a forest. That wasn't quite the sort of forest walk I had in mind. Our messaging felt easy, relaxed. I told AM about working from home for the city council, and he told me he fixed automatic gates and barriers all over Ireland. That's great. You're good with your hands, lol, I said. Are you okay about breaking lockdown rules? For you, I want to be a lot closer than 2 meters, if you know what I mean. Wink emoji. Great, let's be rule breakers. When are you free? Mornings and nights, he said. Is there anything in particular that excites you in bed or anything you'd like to try? The red light was flashing. I had to shut him down immediately or this was going to end up cyber sex and we'd never meet. I'm going to have to be honest here, I messaged, and say that talking is not my thing. In my experience, those who talk about it rarely do it, lol. I would rather practice than talk about it too. I'm really looking forward to meeting you. I'd better start doing sit-ups to get myself in shape, lol. The sit-ups didn't bode well for his body shape, but Christ, the problem with online is that you start analysing every sentence for meaning. We were doing lols even when it wasn't funny, just to prove to each other we weren't raving mentalists. Clearly, an axe murderer would never do a lol, as he'd take himself too seriously. Or she, though I'd never heard of a female axe murderer, but presumably she exists if she does a bit of work on her biceps. Perhaps she'd use a light chainsaw. Years ago, when I first moved into my own house, my mum told me to keep a hammer under the bed in case of burglars. But when I brought a date back, he caught sight of the hammer and was so petrified, he scarpered. After 2 weeks of messaging, AM arranged to come to mine for 8 AM on a weekday. It seemed fitting that AM was meeting me in the AM, but I was not a morning person. I need more sleep than a sloth. During lockdown, I wasn't getting up till 9 and wandered round in a fugue till I finally slung on a jumper and opened my first work email. But for sex, I'd do anything. When it comes to having larks, I'll always be up with the larks. The day before meeting, he kept coming across as a strange mix of nerves and confidence. I meant to ask, he said, how would you like my privates to be presented? On a silver salver, I was thinking. And then he continued, trimmed or shaved? I don't mind, just as long as you feel comfortable. Natural is grand, unless we are going to film a porno movie. I think I might be too nervous for filming a porno, lol, he said. There's still a chance you might scream and run away when you see me at the door, lol. Haha, there's always a chance you might turn and hightail it down the road yourself, lol. I will be a bundle of nerves for sure, but the desire to get my hands on your naked body will stop me from running away. And don't worry too much about makeup or anything, he said. I'd be happy to see you whatever way you are comfortable with. Makeup? He'd be lucky to have me showered by 8 AM. The only thing I would ask is for you to wear a pair of panties, he said. I'd very much like to peel them off you. That's cool with me, I said. That night it began to snow, and the gusting wind kept blowing the flakes upwards. Under the streetlight, they looked like the celebratory sparks of fireworks. I was so excited, I kept waking up every hour. By the morning, when his work van rolled up, snowflakes were drifting from the sky as desultorily as the petals from the cherry trees. I watched this giant of a man walk up to my front door. His face was exactly like his photo, only it was live, and he smiled when he saw me. We kissed, and I could taste cigarette smoke. Okay, I shall leave it there and just to your imagination, and I shall leave the stage, but thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Rosemary. I think we'll have to buy the book to get the rest of it, right? You know, and you know, so but that's something we can do, right? So Christmas is only about 8 months away, right? So we can buy the book for ourselves or for somebody else. So a lot of the group here are in our short story and more literature class. So we've read stories from Japan, Nigeria, the USA, Haiti, and now today we have an Irish short story, specifically from the north, from Belfast. So thank you so much for that reading, for the novel, and for the poem, and for the story. And Rosemary's and Luke's books are published by Ireland House Press, which is an independent Irish press with a long history, and it began specifically to support and publish the writing of women at a time when women writers in Ireland found it very difficult, almost impossible, to be published. But now Ireland House is a thriving publisher. So our second reader today is Luke Morgan, and Luke is from Galway, and Galway is St. Louis' sister city. You know, so it means that anybody from St. Louis who goes to Galway, you just go into a tavern and you say, "I'm from St. Louis, we're a sister city, and I'd have one of these and one of these and one of those," and they're supposed to give it to you for free. I don't think, right? Life is not so good. So Luke Morgan was born in Ireland in 1994. His debut collection, Honest Walls, was published in 2016, followed by Beast in 2022. And in Beast was reviewed by the Irish Times, and the Irish Times said was showing a real ambition with striking, energetic imagination. And just recently, Luke has received the prestigious award given by the University of St. Thomas in Minnesota to honor outstanding Irish poets. This is the Lawrence O'Shaughnessy Award. And for Irish poets, this is arguably the most prestigious award that an Irish poet can win. So fortunately, Luke is here today, and he's going from here tomorrow to Minnesota to actually receive the award and be honored. So we're very fortunate to grab him on his way up to Minnesota.
Or unfortunate
to receive this award. And so his new book, Blood Atlas, has just been published. And again, he just to give things that they're due, he received a bursary from the Irish Arts Council to work on this book. In addition to being a poet, Luke is part of an award-winning Irish filmmaker duo, Morgan Brothers, with his brother, the composer Jake Morgan, and he's made lots of films and some associated with poetry. And Luke lives and works in Galway. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Luke Morgan here to UMSL.
How's it going? I thought it was funny that in Rosemary's novel, the bad guy was Dr. Morgan. It's something I'm choosing to take personally. Hopefully there's some people left on the live stream after her last short story as well. Now for myself, but for you guys as well, I'm going to set a timer just in case, because there's nothing worse than, you know, a poet going on longer than they should. So bear with me as I do that. So this is a great honor to be here in St. Louis, Missouri, and I just really want to take the time to thank, before I begin, Eamonn Wall for inviting myself and Rosemary. It's a great honor to be here, and it's a great honor to speak to you, and I hope you enjoy the poems. I'm going to read poems from my new collection, as Eamonn said, Blood Atlas, which it's actually not technically out yet, but it exists in my hand. So, and it exists at the back of the room as well if you're tempted. So this book is all about lineage and family, the atlas, the map of our blood atlas. So in it, I'm exploring all sorts of things to do with ancestry and lineage and family and relationships. So I'd like to start by reading a poem called A Brand New Cap, and it's about a very, very distant ancestor of mine who drowned in the River Boyne. He got a brand new cap, and he was only, I think, 13, a young lad. And the boys who were in town were kind of messing with him. They took his hat and they threw it into the River Boyne, and he went in after it and he drowned. So I'd like to dedicate this poem to William. A Brand New Cap, and it's a villanelle. So, brand new cap. My great-great-uncle William would drown, trying to save it from the Boyne. His brand new cap, like the one upon the crown of my head. On his way down to Sunday Mass, neat as a sprung coin, my great-great-uncle William would drown, when other conniving boys in town claimed they were just toying, seized his brand new cap crown and threw it in the river. With a frown, he waded through that darkened void, my great-great-uncle William, to drown, become an anecdote, a morbid noun our family struggled to fit a boy in, a gap which brand new caps would crown. But like a river of renown, memories a current we can join, so that my great-great-uncle William won't drown. I retrieve his cap, wear it like a crown. In Ireland, I'm not sure, has many people have here been to Ireland? Anybody have Irish ancestry themselves? Oh yeah, of course, Mrs. has been here. There's quite we grow up in the Republic of Ireland with quite an aversion to the crown, to the British crown. There's a long story, it's a long history. I won't go into it. So imagine my shock when I did Ancestry.com as research for this book and discovered that not only do I have English in my blood, I am directly related to General Montgomery, who was the Viscount Montgomery, who was an instrumental in the World War II, British commander. So, of course, whenever, just like my brethren, we were watching Ireland play England in the rugby, I'm always shouting for Ireland and to destroy England. But this poem explores this relationship that we have as a country, and that I have personally with this country, and how it can be, quite difficult to reconcile the inconvenient truth that we are actually all connected, related. Field Marshal Montgomery. I wish he wouldn't, but it's half-time, so my grandfather rubs dust off a ledger, traces a handwritten lineage to show me your name. Commander of the desert rats during the war, we blame you for trying to crush the rising and cast you on the team we long to crush today. Driving to my mom's clan, I crossed the invisible line along County Monaghan 6 times in 10 minutes, clench my teeth at unfamiliar road signs of a land once removed. So, Montgomery, distant cousin of mine, as the match is resumed and we call for England's scalp, you remain my inconvenient tie, my grim claim to fame, a surname from an old shelf that reminds me how my blood attacks itself. gift, a duplex. I am 164th, a man I've never met, who only has his dad to saddle with the blame, who only has his dad to saddle with the blame, for passing on the traits he always feared he lacked. For passing on the traits he always feared he lacked, this man forgave his dad and left him to his heirs. This man forgave his dad and left him to his heirs, an act of love for one he could not know of yet. An act of love for one he could not know, and yet his own father thought this boy would never grow. His own father taught this boy who would not grow to know the gift of blood and live in gentle debt. To know the gift of blood and live in gentle debt. I am 164th, a man I've never met. I'm not sure, I hear you get a lot of storms here, is that correct? Around this time of year?
Yes.
So in Ireland and in the UK, we have this funny little habit where we name our storms. We name them, we give them the storms names. So a couple of things to explain before I read this next poem, which is Nosebleeds. Met Éireann is the name of the Irish meteorological service. So they're the weather forecasters essentially. But my granny had 7 rowdy children, one of which was my mother, and they all hate each other in various ways and have spent the last number of years as she's prepared for a timely death, conniving and sort of scheming against one another. So this is Nosebleeds. My granny only has so many nosebleeds left in her. We've started naming them like Met Éireann named storms. Ruth stays tame all weekend, but comes gushing when the mink coat whispers in the wardrobe. Martin can usually be expected by afternoon, rages how she's a case for more professional care. John is countries away at the back of our carnivals, could turn up suddenly in the middle of the night, cause her to trip on the carpet. Mary's efficient, leaves no trace, arrives dry and barely visible beneath the nostril rim. Lee's forecast around the clock, Dominic's blotchy but warm. Claire shows the others up by making tissues pirouette in the loo basin like ruby quilted dancers. It's a wonder the woman isn't just skin and bone by now. She keeps on leaking for us from herself, while around the house her crockery trembles with the sign of first wind. My other grandmother on my dad's side, had a stroke very near the time that I was born. And she wasn't able to, she could only say one thing essentially after her stroke. And she was in a wheelchair, and I'm ashamed to admit that I was quite scared of her actually as a kid, because I didn't understand what had happened to her. I was too young to understand, and as such, I never really could relate to her or felt like I could relate to her. And when I'd visit, she would say this thing over and over to me again, and I would sort of, yeah, I'd be quite scared of her. And now that she's passed, I've tried to come to terms with that, and I've tried to, I suppose, in doing what I'm trying to do with this book, which is sort of humanize her in a way. Too late, obviously, but that's why we write poetry. Congestion. And also I was in, just to say one more note, I was in Nepal making a film, and I met this gentleman at a hospital, and he was showing his own disability to me, and it put me in mind of my grandmother. Congestion. At a hospital in Kathmandu, the patient shows his disability to me. Attempting to thank him humbly, I think of my grandmother in the days she could only utter a single phrase after her stroke. I'd stand on cue, embarrassed and waiting as words got lost in her frontal lobe, leaving us to sift and probe what she was trying to say, a stuttering panic in her way, my patient grandfather translating. Dad says she was once tall and grand, a woman of quick wit. But at the table, I avoided eye contact, feared the unstable twitch at the edge of her lipstick, petrified that she would suddenly pick a moment to suddenly demand I look at her. The Nepali who has lost the use of foot and hand now struggles to understand what I'm trying to say to him. So I repeat her phrase on a whim and hope it will still ring true. It is lovely to see you. It is lovely to see you. I'm going to read a love poem. Do you guys have ticks here? Does everybody know what a tick is? And in the west of Ireland, ticks are rampant. So if you go out into the grass wearing short socks, you're going to come home with a tick. And people who have dogs, you know, it's a constant problem. My missus hates ticks. She absolutely hates it. And it's not hard to understand why. But I think every relationship needs rituals that we can come back to. You know, sometimes when times get hard between couples, having these shared touchstone experiences that we return to is a way of, you know, obviously reminding one another of the benefit of being in a relationship and why you love that person the first time. So we have this ritual, Jen and I, after, you know, exploring out in the fields back at home, where we'll check each other for ticks. I'll check her for ticks, and it's quite an intimate thing to do with a partner, with somebody. And I was inspired by Seamus Heaney's poem, The Skunk. I don't know if anybody are aware of it. He wrote a poem for his missus, comparing her to a skunk, which I thought was gas, to be honest. No pun intended. So I wanted to do something as ostentatious as that. So it's sonnet for Dear Tick, and it's for Jen. I love you, darling Tick, because you remind me of the trade required to enjoy the land with just my skin, a truth true since days of holy wells, where to ask for aid, you had to give something to the stone, a ribbon, proof you knew the cost of healing. So, darling Tick, to you I offer the well behind the bone circle of my elbow. Drink, unravel my blood with a whisper. I prefer this intimate toll to the shock of any short, sharp blow. And though you caused a panic when I learned of your thirst, I realized that without you, being with her is only heaven. And what's the use of light when there's no shade first? You are the reminder that if we get lost in one field or 11, we must return to the altars of our bodies, newly sure in the search for you, we will gift, touch, find our cure. How many senses have we got? Hands up with you. Let's hear. What are the senses? What are the human senses?
Sight.
Sight. Yeah. Come on, don't be shy. This is now turned into an interactive poetry. It's happening. Sound. Yes. Hearing. Taste. What other ones have we got? Smell. Touch. Yeah. So mostly we're told that there are 5 senses, right? But there's actually a lot more. They've discovered the people who decide these things have decided that we've got a lot more. They're going to be shocked to hear that in the science department now in the University of Galway. But some people reckon that we have up to about 16 senses. So I thought that learning about all these senses, I thought this would make a great idea for like a sequence of poems called the lesser known senses. So, for example, proprioception is the sense of knowing where your body parts are without having to look for them. So if you were blind, deaf, and dumb, you'd still know where to find your big toe. So that is technically a sense. So I'm going to read 3. They're very short poems. They're sonnets. I'm going to read 3 of them for you today. The first one that I'm going to read is called Thermoception, and it's because I just read a love poem. This is another kind of modern love poem for our times. Thermoception is the sense of detecting changes in temperature. So it's not, I suppose you could say it's quite linked to touch, but you know, being able to feel kind of, oh, the temperature's changed around me is they reckon is a sense. Thermoception. You're cleaning cobwebs up and down the wall when you discover tiny metal hooks from that December you sought to enthrall her with a Christmas from the storybooks. You hung a string of lights around the room, conducting her amazement into heat, which kept away the brunt of winter's gloom. Today, the warmth between you is discreet. You work together to repel a flu with rubber gloves, while your apartment wheezes. 2 cups of steaming lemon sigh at you. The conversation tapers off and freezes. These hooks are rusting, but you leave them in. Removing them would grant the cold its win. Proprioception. The sense of detecting where your body parts are without having to look for them. It seems like any normal town. Grass spine along the boreens, rope knot thudding off a cattle gate, rain gushing out from a gutter spout. But you notice a house that wasn't there before, a path blurry with the signs of subtle growth. All you wanted when you walked these lanes was to have written books, yet here you are again, checking these roads are still how you imagine them, feeling the knee jerk from a faded traffic sign, seeking reassurance from the shedding trees that you still are who you think you are. Interoception, sense of detecting the internal state of the body. In the days after the endoscopy, you drive inside the small hours to reach a place explored in childhood. All is still. You stop your car and step into a night unencumbered by a prying streetlight. You know this place just like a diagram. A spleen-shaped lake, the crooked hawthorn tree distorted by the winds, a traffic cone from when the council foolishly believed they could tame these rural marshy hills. But now you cannot see a single thing. And though you hear the beat of your own breath, it returns to you from a vast terrain which you both know and suddenly do not. I'm going to read 2 more poems. I loved Rosemary's poem on the Proverbs. It was very cleverly exploring, you know, I suppose the advice we get as writers and the experience of being a writer, and axioms speak louder than words. I've been making puns for the last 2 days, and she hasn't laughed at any of them. But that was, I mean, that was very good. That's dad jokes. That's dad joke of the year for me. So a poem is an open wound is the name of this poem, and it's another villanelle. So this is for anybody who writes poetry and anybody who reads poetry. So not a lot of people. A poem is an open wound. A poem is an open wound, weeping in silence, hidden in sight, proof of a life that has moved. Red, if we hadn't already assumed, blue until it comes to the light. Poem, you are an open wound, violently useless, lovingly doomed. You protest with all of your might how pain takes a lifetime to prove. Your sound is a scream, fine-tuned. You haven't run dry, but you might. A poem is an open wound. Those who can't hear you are bruised and toil all alone in the fight. Some pain takes a lifetime to move. Until such a time, let's conclude that surely as day follows night, a poem is an open wound, proof that a life can be moved. In Galway, there is a long walk along the shore. It's called the prom, the promenade, technically, but It's known locally as the prom. And I'm quite anxious when it comes to medical stuff. I hate getting blood taken, and I hate just talking about blood altogether. So you can imagine how difficult it has been for me to write a book about blood. But that was part of it. It came out of this sort of, you write towards what you want to know. You write towards almost fear, something that has fear. For me, anyway, this kind of inspires me to try and sort of write around that, you know. So this is the day the sea froze. The day the sea froze. The day the sea froze, I was on the prom, feeling faint from a blood test. I didn't believe the tide was slowing until a child nearby pointed, yelled, "Look." I moved to the next bench to check it from another angle. The spindrift winked at me like glass in my grandfather's cabinet. A dog bounded out to catch a crab hanging from the crystallized froth, and one by one, we all took our first careful steps. I knew it wouldn't break, safe and cold as a tomb underfoot, more stone than any burn. There we were, colour-coated dots sliding across a great slate mirror. When at last I looked back, the shore had grown darker. I watched headlights flow down hills and replenish themselves like this heaving breath of water I thought would never stop. I would love to thank again, Eamonn, for inviting me. I'd love to thank everybody at University of Missouri St. Louis Global, Jim, Bob, and to you, lovely audience, for listening to my poems today. It's been an honor being here. We've been so well looked after, so thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've been Luke, this has been Blood Out.
Thank you very much, Luke. And we have a little bit of time now for some questions, and the questions can come from here or also from the live stream. Maybe Bob will have access to the questions on the live stream. We have two writers here today who are at the height of their powers. They're writing and publishing poems and stories and novels. So they're the people to ask any questions about writing. You could also ask questions about sex, death, caps, ticks, senses, etc. as well, right? So they're not, they're you know, they have a lot of themes. So if anybody has a question, just for Rosemary or for Luke, please raise your hand. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I?
Yeah. So the books are for sale too, right? You know, so we'll look at the end. So, but does anybody have a question?
When we answer the question, do we go up to the podium?
Probably. So you'll be seen on live stream. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to know about for both of you actually. When did you start writing? And what inspired you to start putting things down on paper? I'm always curious about that.
Yeah, so Rosemary first.
Yeah, so when did I start? Yeah, oh God, oh, forever. It would have taken me probably till my early 30s to really start. I think my first published story was at 30. So I know Luke started really young, but I think also for women, particularly pre-2016, where Waking the Feminists happened and women's writing became ever so much more popular. But before that, so I think it took me a really long time to get into the whole publishing thing and think I was worthy enough of being published. It's all of those sort of confidence things and everything. But I always wanted to be a writer. I mean, there was absolutely no doubt. And I just kind of took too long about it because I wanted life experience. I was kind of one of those. Tennessee Williams, who is also, I believe, from here, he was the one who worked in factories, shops, and everything to get life experience in his 20s. And that was really what I wanted to do. So there's another reason. It wasn't just that. So A, being a woman, B, wanting life experience delayed it. But I eventually. And Luke still, he can't even answer because he's still, Luke, could you tear yourself away from your fandom?
When you sent your first script to the publisher,
Oh yeah,
and I mean, because that's just like a huge thing, right? You send it off.
yeah. Oh, the very first one. Yeah, I suppose that was short stories back in 2004, which was really early, and yeah, it was a local one in Belfast, and yeah, that was. I did feel kind of amazingly that was my first book of short stories. The next one didn't come out till 2016 because I was doing theatre. I kept getting like pulled into other art forms, and yeah, and also I think it was yeah, that particular publisher. Sometimes you keep trying with a publisher and they keep saying, yes, we'll do it next year. Yes, we'll do it next year. And you can end up in this terrible thing with publishers where you think it's going to happen and years pass and it doesn't. So yeah, so I think I fell prey to that as well. Okay, Luke.
So what was the question? There was advice for writers?
How long have you been writing? Like, when did you start writing? When did you know you were a writer?
Yeah, none of my family or friends are really into poetry, which is great because it grounds you as a writer. If you know, because it's very easy to get kind of, I suppose, sort of retreat up your own arse a little bit if you're a writer and you're just writing for other writers. You know, you can get quite highfalutin. But I've always had this grounding force in the form of a mom and a brother who they'll read a poem or they'll hear a poem that I've read and they'll be like, what are you on about? Do you know, what are you on about? So I've always, I don't know exactly where it came from, the impulse to write, but I've always written since I was very young. And I think I probably would attribute it to my grandfather, who was a principal. He was an English teacher and he was a principal of a very small school in Monaghan. And I remember when I was a kid, I'd write poems and they weren't very good poems, but I'd print them off. My mom works in the University of Galway and she'd kill me if I said this, but I used to publish my books. The University of Galway used to publish my books because they print off her, you know, I print them off her account and we'd staple them and then we'd send them off to Grandad and he'd be the only person who'd read the book, you know, and he'd sit with me reading through it and identifying, going through it, all the mistakes, all the grammatical errors, all of the things. All of his feedback was always very kind of English teachery, you know. But I remember one day, I would think I was 12 or 11, at the end of the call, he said, Luke, you have a gift, he said. And I remember how completely caught me off guard because men, particularly Irish men, we're not very good at talking about our feelings or saying I love you or saying those types of things. And that was his way of showing me that he loved me, was going through my book and correcting it with a red pen. Do you know what I mean? But the fact that he said this, I just never forgot it. It really stuck out. And so yeah, when I published my first collection when I was 22 and I donated it to him. And he lived long enough for me to see me publish my first poem. I published my first poem in a very kind of ad hoc journal, like anthology. So yeah, that's how I started anyway.
Other questions? Yes.
I have a question for her.
Yes.
For Rosemary.
Do you want to join me up here, actually?
Yeah, sure.
I'll sit.
Harder for you to publish because you were a woman?
Yeah, I think so in every way. And I mean, I'm lucky right now because Alan Hayes, our publisher, is known as Arlen House is a feminist press. So he's brilliant for a publishing woman, but I genuinely think it's very difficult. I think there's various things in publishing, and that is, yeah, ageism and also, yeah, for women. I mean, you can see a lot of, in recent years, there have been a lot of Irish women. We know Sally Rooney and everyone has been, you know, and many others have been published and taken up by big London publishers because of this whole Sally Rooney effect. And I suppose through Milkman and Dairy Girls. But it's still, yeah, I think before before about 2020, I think it was really terrible for women. I think it has been, particularly in Belfast. I would have said my very first publisher, Lagan Press, was probably, 80% men, it was really published in those sort of proportions. So I do think it has genuinely been very difficult in the past, yeah. But that has changed. Things are changing. Yeah, but still a few problems. Playwriting in particular has always been very male biased, and yeah, they did research actually. It was called research into the number of plays that had been written by women from about 2010 to 2016, and it was incredibly low. Only about 20% of plays were written by women. So I mean, and I still think it's imbalanced. Women you're allowed to write about maybe a children's play or something like that, and it looks like you're given the same opportunities, but you're not given the opportunity to write the really kind of radical stuff. Like they might want more women will publish children's books or something more safe. They're allowed to do this, but they don't get the opportunities to be completely anti-establishment and bold and yeah, very sexual writing. But that is changing. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Good follow up there for Rosemary. So like you obviously are writing things that are at least what you shared today, felt very bold and anti-establishment. So how's the reception been with that, or what kind of conversations do you have around that with readers or just general folks around?
Yeah, I suppose with those sort of sexual things, yeah, I suppose people really brush it under the carpet, and not very much is said about that. I mean, I said Caroline McGuinness called me Belfast Pleasure Laureate. So I think another woman might acknowledge that, but I'm not sure that, a male would do that. I think they would ignore the fact. I don't think, even though I write those really very graphically sexual things, I don't think that gets any notice in Ireland at all. And I don't know if that is Irish society being more conservative, or I don't know. I think like they want maybe the Sally Rooney who's doing the young sex, and there may be that kind of thing that is just a step too far if you're doing it very graphically. So I would say the reception is kind of like, let's not talk about it. I think that is the genuine thing, which is a pity. But I think in my short story titles, what I'm going to do next is embrace that. I've already got a title that is going to be like in your face, and in a way, then people cannot ignore you. Yeah. That's the only way to do it. Yeah.
I have one question for Luke as well. I was curious, you kind of alluded to this a little bit as you kind of gave us the backstory of your poems. But it's always, I'm not a creative, I'm a writer, but not a creative writer at all. And I'm always curious, like clearly you've done so much research that's informed every piece of that book. And like, so it talks about going on like ancestry, but how did you learn about the uncle with the hat, or how did you get to know, what is your research process as a poet for this book this particular book that you shared with us today?
I was actually watching a play about the Irish famine. It was set during the Irish famine, and it got me thinking. I was like, I wonder where my people were in the famine, because as far as I knew, there was no immigration in my family on either side. So it got me thinking, did we, in Ireland, if you managed to live through the famine, you were either hardy or you were a crook, that was it. So I thought, it just got me really interested in that concept of like, we are all, every single one of us, like, a consequence of a long line of coincidences that are just stretches back ad infinitum to, the year dot, and I was really fascinated by that. Suddenly, I was just completely consumed by it. And so I did Ancestry.com, but I also, most of my research, because, I like I need to find a kind of a way into it, into the heart of something before I can care about it enough to be writing poems about it. So a lot of my research was done by actually talking to my living relatives. And the research was not really fact oriented, but kind of anecdote orientated, and talking about to my grandmother who was still alive at the time, just about her memories of what had happened, and then cross-checking that with other people in the family who had done a lot of work on the family history at large. And there was some, obviously, you go back kind of 3 generations and it gets very hazy because nobody can verify anything. Like it was only the last 100 or so years that Ireland even conducted a census, for instance. And I remember there was this gas thing where I think around the formation of the Irish state in the 1920s, they brought in the state pension. And so from the time of one census to the next, all these people had magically aged like 20 years, to get the pension. So they just basically pretended they were older to get free money from the government. So I mean, there's all this sort of, you go back far enough, all of these records, they're handwritten and they're kind of not very secure, so you have to guess towards a lot of this stuff as well. But there is obviously enough evidence to suggest that, another one of my ancestors is a man called James Prescott Jewell, who invented a new form of energy. If you look at I'm not sure in the States you use it a lot, but K-joules is how one measures kind of kinetic energy. So if you look in the UK or in Ireland or in Australia at like the nutritional information of any edible product, you'll see calories, but you'll also see kJoules. So that was really interesting. I just had no idea about this. But yeah, we all have fascinating people in our family tree, whether we know about them or whether history knows about them or not. And the book was kind of born out of that desire to sort of acknowledge that about myself, because I can only speak for myself, but also about all of us,
Okay, do we have any other questions? Any other comments? No. All right, so we will leave it there. So this will ends our Irish programming for the year, except for if you're going to Galway, that's a different part. Or if you come to join us on May 2nd at Webster Groves, but this will be the final event on campus for the semester. So great thanks to Rosemary Jenkinson, who's come all the way from Belfast here to read for us today, and Luke Morgan from Galway. And also, so thanks to everybody in the audience and everybody out there on the live stream as well. So just a final applause for our 2 writers. Look at some books for sale if anybody wants to spend any money.
$15.